Perek Halacha Gimel. Sichacha ba'oichlem psulam imnei she'em mekalim tumah. If he made the schach from fruits or foods, it's possible because they are mekabel tumah. So we go down to the Peirush. Sichacha ba'oichlem, such as fruits, vegetables, psulam, even though they grow from the ground, imnei she'em mekalim tumah, because anything that's edible is mekabel tumah. Now leaves which do not have fruits can be used, however, because they are considered the leftover of the wheat and the vineyard. However, suki, tainim, ubehem tainim, if you have a bunch of branch of figs and they have tainim, or parchili, bunches of anovim, ubehem anovim, there are anovim there, mechabodos ubehem tmorim, or you have these bunches of dates. Rabbeinu Manuach cites that this is eitz, it's a red tree that the dates are attached to them. Any type of these branches with fruits. Royan we see in psulas mubal oichlem. If the majority is not fruit, mesachim behem. In lav, in mesachim behem. If the majority is food, then you cannot use that for schach. A Mishnah cites Sukka, you'd give them a base. Straw, and you have in them shiboilim. You have within them grains. If the majority is not grain, it's okay to put schach on the roof. This v'imlab sudot. Others say until the hard will be more than the fruit. The yodos are those things which are attached to the food that they're considered part of the food when you count whether it's a majority or not. And our law is like the Tanakama, that it's enough to be, if even with the hands it's more than the fruit. Rabbeinu Manoach explains that we go according to the majority, and the miut is bottle v'roiv. The little bit of food is nullified. Therefore, if the food is a little bit and the psoilus is the majority, everything is okay. And if the branches are less and the food is a lot, they are bottle v'roiv, and they're considered oichel, and they receive tumah, and the apostle the schach. What's yodos oichel? What's the hands of food? They can't be eaten themselves, but when it's use it to grab the food, like when the grapes are on their cluster, and you hold the cluster to take off the grapes. That's called yad, and we learn it from a pasuk that it's mekabel tumah if the cluster becomes touched by something that's tummy, then everything becomes tummy. In Tanakama, however, it's enough that the psoilus is the majority, and it doesn't have to be more than the yodos. That we consider the yodos as if they're not mekabel tumah regarding this situation of using it for schach, because you're actually not using it as food. And the others are of the opinion that the yodos have to be more than the food. The Rambam here does not bring that the psoilus should be more than the yodos. The Mishnah asks a question. Why does he bring Shiramanashe Ba'ada says in Sukkah 13b that this is only if he harvested to begin with as tfuah, so that it should be used for schach. And mi'olam, he doesn't need the hands to hold the food. They never thought of using it for the food. Therefore, even if the psoilus is more than the oichel alone, that's why you can use it as schach, because your intention was never to use the stalks to hold the wheat. But if you cut it in order to eat the grains, and they were then established to be the way to grab the grains, then he has to do an action to cause them to no longer be considered an extension of the grain. And in Sukkah 14a, they discuss if it's enough machshava. They says, "Oh, I'm not going to use this anymore," or you need to have he has to step on it. It shouldn't be able to be used as an extension, a yad of the food. The Torah in 629 says that oichel is mekabel tuma, and you shouldn't use schach, and therefore the branches with figs and the branches with grapes, the vines with the grapes. If the service is more than the food, you turn the page. The oil is bottled b'roiv, and you use schach. And if the oil is more, you cannot use it for schach. And if you harvested it for food, then it has a din of yad, meaning extension of the food, that which is attached to the food. It's not enough that the psodas is more than the oil itself. You have to have more than the food and the handle of the food. And if he harvested it just for schach, but it was attached to it some food, then it's considered part of the usable schach that and you can use it because it's bottled. If he harvested it to eat and then he changed his mind and he wants to use it for schach, then this thought alone does not take it out from the law of oichel, but rather he has to do an action or be able to tell that he wants to make it for schach, such as, say, he should step on it with his feet or to thresh it with his feet to show that he doesn't need the stalk, the chaff. Then it's only then is a bottle materials tumah. Toys asks a question on the Chachomim. They don't mention the din of Menashe. Like a Mishnah adds that one cannot say that the Rambam paskins Rab Ado, who disagrees and is of the opinion that a yad receives tumah, because in Hilchos Tumah's Oichlan we paskin hakoitzel lesikuch. If somebody cuts wood, cuts something for schach, it does not have a din of yodos. You don't have to. He has no need for them. And therefore, they're not makabel tumah, like Menashe. And you cannot say that he is of the opinion that you don't have to step on them. It's enough to think about them. That to make him bottle. Because my thought that the thought that he uses for schach is enough. Because in Peirush HaMeir he says, the Rambam says, boyson, that only if he actually threshed them. And there he needs it to be considered threshing in order to nullify the idea of what? Of it being part of the food. The Beis Yosef explains that the Rambam doesn't explain, he doesn't mention it here because he relies on what he said in Hilchos Sukkah. We find the Rambam doesn't repeat himself. If he said it one place, he assumes you know it. And therefore, the Beis Yosef takes a Hilchos when food becomes tamei. And here he shortened it. He says that the psodas is more than the food. Whatever is considered food. If it's an extension of the food, it's food. If it's not an extension of the food, it's not food. And therefore he doesn't explain it here. And since he said it in the beginning of the Halacha, it depends whether the psodas is the majority or not. We know alone that everything that receives tumah is not worthy of schach. You need the psoda should be more than what's makabel tumah. You should know yourself that if he cut for schach, has no din of yad. It's enough that the sodas is more than the food. And if he cut it for food, it has a din of yad. Then the sodas has to be more than not only the food, but also that which is you hold the food with. Like he mentions in Tumas Oichman, Berekei Halacha Ches. We'll turn the page. Shulchan Aruch, Paskins. Every type of food is Mekabel Tumah. You don't use them for schach. The branches of the figs, and they have figs, and the vines of the grape. If the majority is not food, then you can use it. And if not, you cannot use it. And if he harvests them for food, then they become an extension of the food, and they receive tumah, and therefore whatever is left over beyond the food has to be enough to nullify the food and the handle that you hold the food. And if he harvested it to use as covering for the schach, then they're never considered handles of the food, and they actually increase the amount that is there to nullify the food. And however, if he harvested it for food, and therefore it became handles of the food, then he decided to use all of it for schach. Thought alone will not take it out of the category of yad. He has to do an action. If he does not do an action, then it's considered part of the food, and you have to have enough to nullify that. Now, what happens if he puts schach on from vegetables? That what will happen? If they become dry, they will shrink. And aval pi sheish and atolachim, even though right now they are thick and fresh. Since they're going to shrivel, then there's gaps of, you have to view it as what's going to actually happen during Sukkot. There will become too many gaps of light, and it will be possible. The Magen Mishnah cites Sukka. Poisla mishum avia. That when you have ear is worse than posel schach than before, and the shiur of ear is 312, and posel schach is a much larger shiur. 4 amos. 4 amos. But even akuma, it matters where it is. If it's in the middle of the sukkah, then 4 tvachim. So but ear is always 3 tvachim. Why? Since once they dry up, they fall apart, and there's less space, there's less fullness in there. This is also with grass, that even grass which you're not going to eat, and it's not like Abel Tuma, it has to, however, remain enough there on the roof to, even when it dries up, it should remain, and the shade should be greater than the food. Now, if he went ahead and he did use it, and something which falls down, or something that has a bad smell, but the Evan, it's kosher. So why over here does he parcel it? So he says, because the Mishnah Rae Gann explained, there it's talking about that even after some of the leaves will fall down, it will remain shade more than the sun. On L'Hatchila, you don't use it because maybe it'll leave the sukkah. Here we're talking about where he doesn't really have shade. It looks like he has shade, but he doesn't because it's going to shrivel. Rae Gann adds, Halacha Beis is talking about that even though the leaves fall down, there's still enough left of the branch to cover the sukkah. Here we're talking about vegetables that they only are leaves, and when the leaves fall off, there's nothing else left of them. The Magen Mishnah explains that we're talking about vegetables that do not receive tumah because the people don't eat it. But Rashi explains, even if people would eat it, we still look at the ear. If it's 3 tvachim, it's posel. However, other schach is posel only the emtza sukkah by daled tvachim. Menatzad by daled amos. Shulchan Aruch says, Paskins in 629, Sikech birokei shememar liyabesh. If he did it with vegetables which quickly become dry, even though that the apostle of schach, because they were kabel tumah, they don't have a din schach posel, that they become posel with daled tvachim, but they're even worse, like ear, and with 3 tvachim. And if they don't dry up, then they can be like slach posel, then you need dalit vochim. The more adds, anything that's going to dry up within 7 days, right away, even before they dried up, we consider it as if it's dry. And it's considered ear, and it's posel even from the side, 3 tvachim. The Mishnah Berurah writes, cites poskim, that even schach of it, made of yerokis, that it cannot be eaten, they are mekabel tumah, and they can be used for schach, but they dry within 7 days, it's posel. And Shal Tzion, he cites the Maggid Mishnah, and that's the way we find it in the Rambam, and it's included in the words of the Ramah.